The median house price currently in Sydney is $1.65 million.
The media says that landlords are the problem, but here's who's really to blame.
There's nothing in this world I want more other than to be single, hot and thriving. Okay, but I also live in Sydney.
With rents rising and the cost of living still biting, more Australians are looking for affordable housing.
If Australia has the highest minimum wage in the world, why are people still struggling to buy a home?
It now costs more to rent a place on the Gold Coast than in Sydney.
There is a word Australians use to describe the lifestyle this country is supposed to offer. The word is the lucky country. Sunshine, space, opportunity, and a fair go for anyone willing to work hard. That has been the promise for generations. It is on the postcards. It is in the national identity. It is the reason millions of people moved here from all over the world chasing exactly that dream. But right now, in 2025, that promise has a serious problem. And the problem is that most Australians can no longer afford a roof over their heads. Rents in Sydney and Melbourne have hit levels that would make cities in Europe blush. First home buyers are being pushed so far out of the market that some have stopped trying altogether. People with full-time jobs, sometimes 2 full-time jobs, are spending more than half their income just on rent. Workers, nurses, teachers, tradespeople, the exact people a functioning society cannot survive without, are being priced out of the cities they serve. And the truly maddening part is that this did not happen overnight. This has been building for decades. Politicians have known, economists have warned, experts have written reports, presented data, and sounded alarms. And yet, here we are. The crisis did not creep up on anyone. It was allowed to happen. In this video, we're going to break down exactly how Australia ended up here, who is responsible, what policies failed, and why the people being hurt the most are ordinary Australians who did absolutely nothing wrong except try to build a life in the country they call home. If you have not subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications. We cover the issues that actually affect your everyday life, not just the ones that are comfortable to talk about. Now, let us get into it.
I just got told that my rent is going up by $100 a week. And I live alone and it already went up by $50 with what feels like it was 6 months ago, but I checked it wasn't. It was 12 months ago. And I basically have 2 weeks to figure out what I'm doing. And I just don't even know what to do. Like, obviously everyone is going through this rental crisis at the moment, but I don't understand. I swear only a few months ago they were complaining about how there's too many apartments in Brisbane, but yet why is there not one single fucking apartment for someone who just wants to live on their own and have a car park? Why is that so impossible? And like, I checked the average salary for Brisbane and my salary is a little bit higher than that, and even I can't find somewhere that's going to be even slightly livable after paying tax and HECS. Anyway, just wanted to see how we're all doing, if anyone else is in the same boat, because I'm so angry. I've lived here for 2 years in the same apartment and I love living here, and the thought of leaving is really depressing. So, cool.
What if I told you that a child born in Sydney today would not own a home until they're around 50 years old? The median house price currently in Sydney is $1.65 million. Just to buy one, you need over $400,000 in cash up front. That's a $300,000 deposit and then $70,000 in stamp duty before you even step into your new home. Then comes the mortgage, $10,000 per month after tax for 20 years. Oh, and you'll hand in over $1 million in interest. Sydney's income to price ratio is 13.8 times the median income. That's worse than New York, worse than San Francisco. Only Hong Kong is more cooked than us. For the average earner, it will take 46 years just to save that deposit. Let me say that again, 46 years. That's barely a delay, that's a life sentence. And if you can't buy, good luck renting. Australia had just 36,000 rental vacancies in 2023. Rents are surging. 85% of new migrants go straight into rental stress. And many families are forced to cram into tiny little apartments. This is barely a housing market anymore. It's almost like a weapon of mass impoverishment. And it's turning the great Australian dream into a nightmare.
If Australia has the highest minimum wage in the world, why are people still struggling to buy a home? Looking here just on Google, you can see that $24.95, almost $25 per hour is the minimum wage. And if you work the average work week of 38 hours per week, you should be making $9.48 per week before taxes. Most people around the world will probably be like, oh, almost $1,000 a week? That's pretty good. But after taxes, you're only going to be taking home $815 per week. And here you can see a new home build in New South Wales is going to cost you $1.2 million. And if you want to live in Sydney metro area to have a good job, you're going to be having to pay $1.4 million on average to live in Australia. To me personally, this is why I believe that raising the minimum wage just makes everything more expensive and it shouldn't be done.
The media says that landlords are the problem, but here's who's really to blame. Rents are up 40% in 3 years. Everybody's blaming property investors, but here's the reality. Government approvals? Well, they're down. Construction costs? Well, they're up 25%. Not enough houses are being built. So supply crashes whilst population grows by 500,000 a year. So you do the math. More homes equals lower rent. While everybody's complaining, we are solving the problem and helping everyday Australians build wealth while doing so.
To understand why Australian housing is in crisis right now, you need to go back a few decades, because this is not a story about bad luck or unexpected market forces. This is a story about deliberate choices made by governments, encouraged by investors, and cheered on by anyone who already owned property and watched their net worth climb while doing absolutely nothing. In the 1990s, Australia introduced a policy called negative gearing. The idea was to encourage investment in rental properties by allowing landlords to deduct losses on investment properties from their overall taxable income. On paper, it sounds reasonable. In practice, it became a rocket fuel for property speculation that has never really been turned off. Then in 1999, the federal government introduced a 50% capital gains tax discount for investment properties. Suddenly, buying a house was not just about having somewhere to live. It was one of the most tax-advantaged investments in the country, and the incentive was not to provide affordable housing. The incentive was to hold the asset, watch it grow, and cash out with a massive discount on what you owed the government. The result was entirely predictable. Investors flooded the market. Demand for properties to buy and rent out drove prices up. First home buyers started competing not just with other first home buyers, but with investors who had multiple properties, significant tax advantages, and far more borrowing power. Meanwhile, the supply side of the equation was being neglected at every level of government. Social housing was underfunded. Planning approvals moved at a glacial pace. Local councils blocked higher density development to protect the character of existing neighbourhoods, which is a polite way of saying that existing homeowners did not want new apartments near them because it might affect their property values. So demand kept rising, supply stayed constrained, and prices went in only one direction. This did not happen because the system broke. It happened because the system worked exactly as it was designed to work, just not for the people who needed it most.
There's nothing in this world I want more other than to be single, hot and thriving. Okay, but I also live in Sydney. And my rent bill comes through. Sometimes I wouldn't mind having a man who wants to go 50-50, maybe even, I don't know, 80-20 his way. Because, back in the olden days, they used to pay for everything. But, it's whatever. People are fighting for equality these days, so I've got to be off the brunt of that. So, but I want to be single, but I also want my rent to be cut in half, because it is $500 per week. So if any man wants to pay half my rent, but I don't want to talk to you, I don't want to see you, I don't want anything to do with you apart from the fact that you pay half my rent. So let me know. Applications below.
Younger generations are the ones that are the most affected by the housing affordability and rental crisis here in Australia, because they are the ones that are trying to enter markets that are increasingly hard to enter. Yet young people have not turned into racist bigots over it, because they understand that immigrants, firstly, are not the issue that are fundamentally rising house prices. It's all about supply side policy that hasn't been implemented enough. And the second thing is that they have empathy for other people, and so they do things like protest for genocides in other parts of the world because they see a wrong and they want to try to do anything they can to address it. The fallacy that exists where people think that young people can't or shouldn't have an opinion on politics because they are young is so ridiculous to me, when you know, and you can tell in your comment, that young people are the ones that are going to deal with the consequences of the housing affordability crisis. It's just that most young people, because we're educated and we read and we listen to the information and we're not brainwashed by propaganda, know that immigration is not the problem.
With rents rising and the cost of living still biting, more Australians are looking for affordable housing. In Victoria, there are over 26,000 affordable housing units run by not-for-profit housing agencies. These homes have lower rents than the average market price, but are designed to assist people on low incomes. So how do these properties work, and what criteria do renters need to meet to apply for one? Affordable housing is a type of rental available for Australians who don't meet the requirements for social housing, but are still struggling to pay their rent on a low income. Affordable housing can be operated by private or not-for-profit housing agencies, and these agencies can receive government funding to help address housing shortages. So what exactly is considered affordable? For a property to be considered affordable housing, rents must be set at least 10% below the area's median market rent. And these rental prices are also not able to increase by more than 5% a year. How do you qualify for affordable housing? There's a number of criteria that need to be met in order to qualify for one of these low-income units. These include total housing income limits. The advertised rent for a property is not more than 30% of the household's gross income, and no one in the household can own a property. So what's an example of an affordable housing development in Gippsland? In 2024, the Victorian government announced that 175 social and affordable homes would be built across Gippsland as part of the $1 billion Regional Housing Fund. The new 51-unit social and affordable housing development in Warragul, owned and operated by the not-for-profit Housing Choices Australia, is an example of low-income living. So do you qualify for affordable housing? And do you think Gippsland needs more?
One of the reasons why a lot of Australians won't vote in any election is because 90% of the politicians are corrupt, money hungry, and only looking out for themselves. The Australian government needs to look at its people and realise that there are more people on the streets than in our homes at the moment. Parents, families, kids with children. People who can't even afford to feed their families. But no, it's perfectly fine for all our politicians to receive an extra $9,000 back at the end of the year on their tax. But families with young children, like myself, sit and struggle. Impossible to find a fucking home. I remember having to live in a caravan with my daughter. Was not even one. Living off handouts from friends and from family. Crying every single night because my partner had to leave us. He could not be there while I raised my first daughter. It's fucking disgusting. Build fucking homes. We don't care about your fucking paycheck. You got enough fucking money in your pockets. Think about everyone else in the world. And just in our little country alone. There are so many abandoned buildings around in the city. Turn them into apartments. Give people a home. And at a decent fucking rent. You want to charge people $700 a fucking week for a 3-bedroom home? No wonder people are living on the streets. No wonder people are being forced to move back in with elderly parents, with their children. You want to start seeing support from the Australian people? You need to start considering the Australian people. Start considering what we're going through. The ones who don't have a fat bank account. The ones who are living paycheck to paycheck to paycheck. Still living off family handouts. And hoping to God that karma comes their way and miraculously a home will appear. It's fucking disgusting. Now, this is why I don't vote. This is why I can't vote for anyone in our government. Because no one wants to help us. Buck up, government.
It now costs more to rent a place on the Gold Coast than in Sydney. Under this LNP government, Queensland is fast becoming one of the least affordable places to live. It now costs more to rent a place on the Gold Coast than in Sydney. Here in Brisbane, it's climbing too. This government has no plan to make housing more affordable, and these increases in prices are forcing more and more people onto the social housing waiting list.
It is incredibly tough for families to make ends meet. Those kinds of rents are completely unaffordable. Now, David Crisafulli and the LNP promised universal cost of living relief would continue for Queensland families for as long as they needed it. They have well and truly broken that promise. This is a crisis that is spiralling out of control, and we have a government that doesn't care at all about supporting families to get through.
Hello. Due to the living crisis in Sydney, this is pretty much what most people can afford in the day and age now. If you come through, we have one front door. Oh my god, oh, it's cozy. And if you come in closer, it's a single-sized bed just enough for a regular adult here in Sydney. And if you go over here, a nice area for students to study, or a work area for those who work a 9 to 5 and like to work from home. And a shelf, so you can store your can of food, which is the only thing people can afford right now. Welcome to my home tour. Goodbye now, everybody. And the door's broken. Do you like my room tour?
For a long time in Australia, renting was understood to be a temporary stage of life. You rented when you were young, when you were saving, when you were figuring things out. Eventually you bought. That was the accepted trajectory, the assumed path. The thing you did before you did the real thing, that assumption is now completely broken. And for millions of Australians, renting is not a stepping stone anymore. It is simply where they live. Permanently. At a cost that is consuming their lives. Median rents in Sydney have surpassed the $3,000 a month mark for a standard house. In Melbourne, rents have surged dramatically over the past 3 years. Even in cities like Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide, which were once considered affordable alternatives, rents have climbed sharply as people relocated, seeking cheaper options, and simply moved the crisis with them. The vacancy rate, which measures the percentage of rental properties sitting empty at any given time, has collapsed to historic lows across most of the country. A healthy rental market has a vacancy rate of around 3%. In many Australian cities, it has been sitting below 1%. That means for every available rental property, there are dozens of desperate applicants. Landlords can ask for virtually anything and someone will pay it, because the alternative is no home at all. The stories coming out of this crisis are not statistics. They are real people. Nurses driving 2 hours to work because they cannot afford to rent near the hospital they work in. Teachers living in their cars. Families in tents. Single parents choosing between groceries and rent. Elderly Australians on fixed incomes being evicted because their landlord decided to sell or increase the rent beyond what any pension can cover. These are not edge cases. These are not unusual stories. These are happening in every city and every region in this country right now. And the safety net that was supposed to catch people in exactly these situations has a hole so large you could drive a bus through it.
The worst part of Australia's rental crisis is not that in one generation we've gone from saving to buy to saving to rent. It's not allowing individuals to own 283 investment properties. It's not rental inspections being busier than Ruben Solo's 21st. It's not foreign investors causing local homelessness. It's not even 70% of Airbnbs previously being long-term rentals. It's the fact that having shelter over your head is now dependent on impressing a country road mannequin with a hair gel sponsorship deal, a mythological creature known across the Nullarbor as a real estate agent.
Here is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. Because to be honest about the Australian housing crisis, you have to be honest about who benefits from it. And the answer is a very specific group of people who also happen to have enormous political influence. Property investors in Australia are not a fringe group. There are over 2 million landlords in this country. Many of them vote. Many of them are vocal, and many of them have built their entire financial security on the assumption that property prices will keep rising. Policies that would genuinely fix the housing crisis, removing negative gearing, reforming the capital gains tax discount, increasing social housing supply at scale would by definition cool the market, and cooling the market means the value of existing investment properties stops growing as fast. So every time a government even floats the idea of serious reform, the backlash is immediate and loud. And governments who need votes to stay in power consistently choose the path of least political resistance, which is to say, they announce inquiries, release discussion papers, commit to targets they will never meet, and then quietly do very little. Then there is the question of immigration. Australia runs one of the highest per capita immigration programs in the developed world. That is not a criticism of migrants. Immigration has built this country and continues to enrich it in every sense. But the brutal reality is that you cannot bring hundreds of thousands of new people into a country every year if you are not building enough homes to house them. The infrastructure has not kept pace, and new arrivals, often vulnerable and unfamiliar with the system, end up competing with existing residents for a housing supply that was already strained before they arrived. The result is political paralysis. Neither side of the debate wants to have the honest conversation. The left does not want to touch immigration numbers. The right does not want to touch property investor tax breaks. And in the middle of that political cowardice, ordinary Australians are sleeping in their cars. So let us zoom out and ask the bigger question. What actually happens to a society when it can no longer house the people who make it run? The consequences are not abstract. They are already unfolding in real time across Australia. When workers cannot afford to live near the places they work, labour shortages get worse. When young people cannot build financial security through home ownership the way previous generations did, wealth inequality deepens and the social contract starts to fray. When families are forced into overcrowded, insecure, or distant housing, health outcomes suffer, children's education suffers, and communities fragment. There is also a deeper psychological damage that does not show up in the data, but that anyone who has been through housing stress knows intimately. The constant anxiety of lease renewals, the fear of a landlord deciding to sell, the humiliation of inspections where you compete against strangers for the right to pay an enormous amount of money to live somewhere basic. The feeling that, no matter how hard you work, stability is always just out of reach. That is not a small thing. That corrodes people. And yet, here is what is remarkable. The housing crisis in Australia is not inevitable. It is not a natural disaster. It is a policy failure. And policy failures can be reversed. But that requires political will, honest conversation, and a decision that the right of every Australian to have a safe and affordable home matters more than the investment returns of those who already have several. If this video resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to see it. Drop a comment below and tell us how the housing crisis has affected your life personally. We read every single one, and we will see you in the next video.